Hey everyone, welcome back to the Dr. Josh Axe Show. On today's episode, I'm going to be answering your questions on aluminum in deodorants, treating hyperactivity in young children, health habits for longevity, and so much more. Hey, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so you never miss an episode. So, first question is, Dr. Axe, you recently talked about the chemicals in Roundup and how toxic they are. What can we do to make sure our food is safe to eat? Well, I would just say this. One, it's impossible to know for sure, but I would say buy organic. That's one way we know that the organic certification tends to be very well tested. And organic foods tend to have much, much less chemicals than conventional. So my first answer is buy organic. My second answer is know your local farmer. One of the things Chelsea and I do is we go to our local farmers market in Franklin, Tennessee, where we're able to meet the farmers, ask them ourselves, and also I think just be able to really taste the food. So that's another thing is we're able to taste the freshness, and oftentimes you can see when you're buying from a conventional grocery store, not organic, there's these peels on there, and there are just more issues there. So there's no doubt, generally speaking, eating organic yourself or buying organic food, shopping at your local farmers market, and having a relationship and asking the farmers themselves. The third thing is making sure you're washing your food once you get it, okay? And also knowing about the Dirty Dozen and Clean 15. You know, certain foods like strawberries and lettuce have very, very high levels of chemicals versus something like a grapefruit that has a thick peel you have to take off. That's the rule of thumb if you're wondering. Think about this. Strawberries, you're eating the flesh. When you are eating a banana or a grapefruit or even certain types of vegetables that grow in the ground, so they're not going to be sprayed as much like carrots. And so, you know, I would say know the Dirty Dozen, Clean 15. Wash off your fruits and vegetables. And my last piece of advice is, and sometimes this can be a little bit challenging, but when you can, try and do a little bit of gardening yourself or even an herb garden. One of the things Chelsea and I love doing is having fresh basil and things grow in our own garden and doing that certain times of year. So that's for the advanced level person if you can do your own garden, but generally, buy from your local farmers market, buy organic. And by the way, meat and dairy products that are non-organic tend to be the most toxic along with that Dirty Dozen. And that's not talked about a lot. We talk about the Dirty Dozen, but not meat and dairy. Meat and dairy should be wild or organic or pasture raised and free of chemicals. And so when you're buying meat and dairy, by the way, if you can only buy two things organically, it should be meat products. And then if you do dairy, we don't really do that. I do coconut milk instead, but that's what I would recommend is meat. Did you know that 80% of antibiotics consumed today are consumed by livestock? So especially cows. So if you're eating beef that's not organic, you are getting a lot of hormones. You're getting growth hormone. You're getting oftentimes estrogen. You're getting genetically modified feed. You're getting a lot of the non-organic, the chemicals that are sprayed into the food they're eating. So that's one thing to keep in mind is that meat, if it's wild and grass-fed, it's great. If it is not, you really want to stay away from it, even more than produce. So I hope those tips help you for staying away from chemicals, including Roundup. Because again, think about this. If you have an animal eating corn that's sprayed with Roundup, well, then you're going to be getting that via, the meat you're eating. And so you really want to stay away from non-organic meat as much as you can. Next question. How can I find the right doctor when I have trust issues with the medical field? Welcome to the club. I have trust issues with the medical field as well. So I would say this, for good reason, you might have trust issues with the medical field, right? But at the same time, one thing I would ask you is that do you also have trust issues with other people? Is this an issue with just one field, or are you overly paranoid and maybe you also have trust issues with other people? So that my first piece of advice is, when did your trust issues begin? Maybe you have limiting beliefs about people and about systems in general to where maybe you don't trust anyone or anything. If that's the case, you want to go back and figure out, when did you first stop trusting people? Because, by the way, this can be a really limiting belief in life. It can really hold you back in your life tremendously, including your health. And so if you don't trust people, trust is the most important character quality when it comes to building relationships. If you can't trust someone, you will never get close to them. And so you really need to realize that, you know what, there are different levels of trust and there are different types of people. And so for myself, I trust my wife, Chelsea, a 10 out of 10. I trust God at an even higher level, 10 out of 10. And so we'll make Chelsea 9 out of 9, 9.999, and then God 10. All that being said, I trust them close to unconditionally. Versus there's other people that might come into my life. Let's say there's a business scenario and I'm getting a strange vibe from somebody and I've heard about character issues with them. Well, then I don't trust them in that way. And so all that being said, but I do believe that people have the capacity for good. And so I do want to believe the best in somebody, but yet I'll remain cautious, right? This is all emotional intelligence. It's a form of self-awareness and others' awareness, being aware of others. But I do want to say this. If you just don't trust people generally, including people close to you, then you'll never be able to actually build great relationships. You'll never be connected, and you'll never and you will suffer health-wise because you won't feel certain emotions or have hormones released like oxytocin that allow you to feel close to someone and that actually increase your lifespan. So this is very, very health related. Now, going back to the medical field, how do you find a good doctor you trust? Here's the way that I've done it. Is I've tried to follow the doctor for a period of time, especially let's say they're on social media. Now, many of them aren't. But if there's someone I can follow on social and start to see their life, their character, what they follow, how they react, how they answer questions, then I start to trust them more. I'll give you an example of this. You know, I look at somebody like a friend of mine, Dr. Will Cole. You know, he's somebody I've got to know over the years I really trust. It could be my brother, you know, Dr. Jordan X. It could be Dr. Christopher Motley. There are people that I really trust. Someone who's not a doctor, but Jordan Rubin, someone I trust I could go to and ask advice from. So all that being said, there are some amazing doctors you should trust. And if you're saying the medical field, well, which medical field? Are you talking about the conventional medical field that is primarily MDs? Are you talking about the functional medicine field? Are you talking about acupuncturists? Are you talking about chiropractors? Are you talking about osteopaths? So that's another thing. For myself, when I trust personally somebody who understands functional medicine or something like a Chinese medicine or biblically based medicine much more than I would somebody in the conventional medical system because we have a different philosophy and worldview. Like the philosophy of Jordan Rubin, a close friend of mine, it's based on the Bible and it's based on ancient ways of healing and modern science. And so it's all of those versus just modern science alone. And they're connected to a pharmaceutical company, and the pharmaceutical companies have paid out, I don't know if it's trillions, but they've paid out an unbelievable amount on lawsuits because of unethical doing things that are completely unethical. So again, just so you know, I have trust issues too with the conventional medical field. I don't have that many trust issues though with the more natural healing field. And so what I would say is go and find somebody who is a functional medicine doctor or somebody who practices more of that regenerative medicine, natural medicine, and personalized medicine, and find a friend who's had a great experience, or a number of people that have had a great experience, and then go in a trusting manner the best you can. And so that's my best advice in terms of how to approach finding the right sort of doctor. And what I do is I'll go online and just search on. I don't use Google very much anymore because I don't trust Google. But if I'm using Brave or DuckDuckGo or my search engines, what I'll do is I'll go on and search functional medicine doctor in Tampa, Florida, or regenerative medicine doctor in Florida or something like that. And that's the way I'll search. And then I'll ask through word of mouth. And that's how you tend to find somebody great. All right, next question. I have asthma and haven't found a doctor yet who can fix it. Do you have any advice? Yeah, very similar to what I mentioned before. If you're trying to find a doctor who can help, connect with somebody that does functional medicine and personalized medicine. If I were you and you wanted to go really at this, I would see an acupuncturist that treats more complex conditions and ask them what's going on and then start working with that. And I would see a functional medicine doctor. I'd do both at the same time. I'd see the acupuncturist that's going to really look at things from an Eastern perspective. And I'd also see the functional medicine doctor who's probably going to do more Western, but understand the Eastern perspective and do more nutrition-based therapies. You know, a few things I do like for asthma, by the way, I really like it. I mentioned acupuncture. I like quercetin as a supplement. I like N-acetylcysteine as a supplement. I like licorice root, reishi, and astragalus. I also like taking an organ complex that has lung and liver and those sort of things in it. But those would be some of the top supplements and natural remedies that I would recommend as well. And then there's a therapy called Qigong. It's doing certain types of breathing that can really strengthen your lungs. Qigong would be an amazing therapy for you as well. All right, next question. What are your current thoughts on a keto diet? Well, I want to share something, and sometimes, not very often, but sometimes my mind shifts on things a little bit. And I think I used to recommend the keto diet more than I do now. But generally, I never recommended the keto diet for everybody. For me, it's always been a subset of people recommended for the keto diet. I still recommend the keto diet for children with epilepsy or having epileptic seizures. I still recommend it for people with MS for a period of time, multiple sclerosis. I do recommend it for some people who need to lose weight, but generally, I don't recommend the keto diet very often outside of those unique conditions, some of those neurological disorders and things that I mentioned. And the reason is that, I think doing any sort of macronutrient and very, very high doses long-term tends to tax specific organ system. So for instance, you don't want to overconsume carbohydrates because of the damage it does to your pancreas and your liver, right? Because your pancreas, it can cause diabetes, right? It starts to burn out those insulin receptor sites. So you don't want to overconsume carbohydrates because they overburden the organ system or the organ specifically of the pancreas. Well, the keto diet tends to overburden the liver and gallbladder and put too much stress there if you're on it long term. Now, doing it for 90 days, that can be great, or 30 days. So doing the keto diet short term, I'm a fan of that for those, especially those conditions that I mentioned. But I think for most people, following a diet that's more of a regenerative diet, where you're really focusing on cellular regeneration and longevity and a personalized medicine approach like a TCM, that's a traditional Chinese medicine diet, or a GAPS diet. I'm much bigger fans of those diets than AIP is another one. I'm a much bigger fan of those diets than others. And I think that everybody is unique and everybody needs a diet personalized for them. And I've mentioned this before, but if somebody has cancer, we want their body to start having a lot of autophagy to where their body is eating up and destroying cancer cells, okay? So for that person with cancer, I'm going to recommend some intermittent fasting. I'm going to recommend a diet that's going to be much higher in vegetables and berries and mushrooms, and actually lower or moderate in protein. I'd have them actually do more bone broth and less muscle building protein so their body can get into more autophagy, some healthy fats, but not too high. But again, I'd have them do juice vegetables. I would have them do cooked vegetables. I'd have them do some raw, and then again, some berries, some mushrooms. And that's the diet I would have them do for cancer, for most types of cancer at least. Now, if somebody has inflammatory bowel disease, I would have them do a diet that's going to consist mostly of soups. It's the easiest to digest. It's going to be cooked meat and bone broth and some vegetables and some herbs and maybe rice as well. Okay. And that's the diet I would do for most people who have inflammatory bowel disease, Crohn's, colitis, severe forms of leaky gut syndrome, food sensitivities, food allergies. That I would have them do that sort of GAPS, AIP like diet for those people. But then for somebody, let's say it's a young athlete and they want to put on muscle, and then for them, it's a very different diet. It's very high protein, very high, more carbohydrates. So my point there is that, for everybody, you need a different type of diet. Every single person is unique. And so that's the way that I would answer that. So keto diet, there's a subset of about 10% of people that should be on a keto diet and are really going to thrive on it. And same thing goes for carnivore diets. A friend of mine that I've talked to in the past, Michaela Peterson, she does the Lion diet or carnivore diet. And there are people doing that for a period of time that really works for them. Now, do I think that's the ideal diet long term? No. Especially if they can get to their body to where they're not reacting to other foods. But I do think typically for most people, let's say the average person, the diet should be vegetables, meat, as the basis of the entire diet. Meat and vegetables, meat and vegetables, meat and vegetables. And when I say meat, I also mean organ meats and bone broth. There should be a balance of all of those. Vegetables, maybe a little bit of fruit, and some things like rice or sweet potato, some healthy fats from olive and coconut, and some things like mushrooms. And if someone can follow that diet, that's not, 70% of people, that's what they should be on. But again, keto diet for me, again, I think it's really good for certain conditions or for short periods of time for some people. But long term, for some people, it's going to be too much stress on the liver or gallbladder. Now, let me say this as well. It depends on how you're wired emotionally. Someone like myself, who my liver and gallbladder work more than most people because the emotions that I experience when I come into conflict are frustration and impatience. And those are more taxing to the liver. Versus if you're more of a person that worries a lot and you worry constantly, that impacts the pancreas. So you need to be more careful with that organ. So you might do a little higher fat and really stay low carb for longer periods of time. So again, it all comes down to this. You need to personalize the diet for you. It's so important. And part of that is becoming aware of your own body. For us, instance, so we've gone through this whole thing of no grains. I've never been completely no grain because I think lacto fermented foods people have eaten for thousands of years, like whole grain sourdough bread, sprouted whole grains, like sprouted oats, and rice. I mean, the longest living country in the world, Japan, with the most centurions, Okinawa, rice is the number one food they're getting regularly. And they have the longest lifespan. So to tell me that no grains, someone should never eat grains, that's just not reality. But again, some of this has to do with your genetics. If your ancestors grew up eating rice, their bodies developed being able to tolerate it better. If I'm, I've got more German in my blood, and so I probably do really well with potatoes. Which, by the way, as I've done my blood glucose monitor on my arm, the continuous glucose monitoring, I notice my body actually tolerates potatoes incredibly well, and part of that might be due to my genetics. And so, all that being said, follow a unique diet that is customized for you. Okay. Next question, is aluminum in deodorants or antiperspirants really bad for you? Well, generally speaking, do I believe that? Yes. Now, I want to go through the science here as well. But yes, aluminum in deodorants, do I believe it's bad for you? I do. Do I believe do I believe there's worse things for you? Likely, yes. But here's the thing, it's just adding to your toxic load. It has been linked in high quality studies, aluminum, to breast cancer and Alzheimer's disease. Now, I want to go through this one study on Alzheimer's disease. Now, by the way, this study is not done on deodorant specifically. This is done on drinking water, okay? But your skin is your body's largest organ. Your armpit is one of the area where you have a lot of absorption. There's certain areas of your body where the absorption is higher, tends to be higher in your armpit where you sweat. There's things going in and out. And so, one, I don't know that there are really any good studies on deodorant itself, the aluminum deodorant, but I do know there's one on water. So here, there's one study, and here's what it found. By the way, this is the highest quality study done on aluminum, and it was done on 4,000 adults in France. And they found that the levels of aluminum consumption in drinking water in excess of 0.1 milligrams a day were associated with a doubling of dementia risk and a 3 times increased risk of Alzheimer's disease. So there's no doubt that overexposure or consumption of aluminum leads to Alzheimer's and increases your cancer risk and other illnesses. And there are so many brands that now are great that are aluminum free. And so I would say, yes, just buy deodorant that is aluminum free, whether it be Schmidt's or there's a lot of other brands that are great that are out there. All right, next question. What are your thoughts on vibration plates? Is there research behind them? Yeah, I'm a fan of vibration plates, more specifically for osteoporosis. I think when you look at the benefits, that is definitely the scientific literature shows the most benefits there. Now, I do want to say, listen, research is ongoing and studies have mixed results. There have been some that have shown that it absolutely helps osteoporosis. There's also some research that shows that for some people, it may not help them as much. So for instance, let's say for myself, if I'm already weightlifting and walking and doing all the things I should do, that if I go get on a vibration plate, it really may not change my bone density at all. Okay. So some of the research shows that if you already have really good bone density, it may not add to your bone density. However, there are studies that show if you have poor bone density, such as the group that is in the highest category of low bone density is going to be postmenopausal women. And in those studies, using vibration plates, they experienced a tremendous increase in bone mineral density when they used a vibration plate. And they also found in the same study, they said whole body vibration reduced fracture risk in healthy individuals with chronic illness. So again, it's those without chronic illness. So it can maybe reduce fractures, and also whole body vibration may be safe and beneficial for osteoporosis as well. So I think it's most beneficial for postmenopausal women who have or people that have osteoporosis, but there may be some benefits for those who don't have either of those things. Now, if you're a person with osteoporosis, you want to eat a lot of green vegetables and celery. Celery looks like your bones. There's a principle in Chinese medicine called like supports like. It's really mineral rich, celery is in celery juice. So celery would be great to eat. Steamed spinach and watercress and green leafies are going to really build your bones as well. Getting good protein sources like grass-fed beef. And then in addition, lifting weights. Listen, even if you can only do 3-pound weights or 5-pound weights, walking is also extremely beneficial multiple times a day. Go on a 15-minute walk a couple times a day. Try and get 10,000 steps in. And then at least, and then take a good multivitamin, and you might also do a micronutrient test if you think you have low bone density, and be able to tell exactly what you're deficient in, because it might be vitamin D, might be magnesium, might be calcium, could be collagen. It's another thing I would take is a collagen supplement along with a multi and a vitamin D or magnesium supplement that can also help with bone density. But the question was originally about vibration plates. Yes, generally I'm a fan of them, but they're going to benefit some people more than others. Next question, any advice for treating hyperactivity or dysregulation in young children? So ADD, ADHD, and dysregulation. Yeah, number one piece of advice is improve the diet. And I was the kid who was diagnosed with ADHD my entire life, and really struggled with learning. And I found for myself, when I improved my diet, I was able to focus at a much, much higher level. So for me, it was removing dairy and excess carbs, sugar. I mean, that really, really was a game changer for me. But I would say, yeah, food sensitivities, especially dairy, especially gluten, especially sugar and excess carbs. Those are the biggest villains that are going to cause those issues. You might also do an IgG food sensitivity test to be able to tell. And again, those aren't always perfectly accurate, but sometimes they can show things that are really standing out that may be causing some of those food sensitivities. Supplement-wise, a bone broth protein supplement would be very high on the list, because a lot of these issues start in the gut. You need to repair the gut. You got to have collagen there. So making your kids a smoothie with bone broth protein, whether it's a chocolate flavor, vanilla flavor, adding in maybe just a half a cup or quarter cup of berries, some coconut milk, that's a great meal for a kid. Also, if they're not sensitive, eggs and potatoes, or a bowl of oatmeal with, again, some protein. But I do think that berry smoothie is great for kids. Omega-3 supplements have been shown in clinical studies, 1,000 milligrams to help reduce and improve ADHD symptoms. B vitamins, like a B complex, and maybe even ones that are methylated, might help kids. You could also, I actually prefer sometimes liver as a supplement if kids can take, again, just if they can swallow pills if they're old enough, as a supplement too for methylation, and then probiotics. But those would be the top supplements for most kids with ADHD. And then here's the other big one, loads and loads and loads of time outdoors. I don't care if it's raining. I don't care. Well, listen, if it's freezing rain, maybe keep them in that day. But generally speaking, you want them outdoors as much as you can. Outside in the morning, waiting for the bus, okay? Or even if they're not going on the bus, then kick them outside for 30 minutes before school and to have them run around. But they want to be active and outdoors as much as possible. And it's really, really important. And so, of course, boys tend to have much greater rate of diagnosis with ADHD and ADD and some of these issues. So I would say more time outdoors, very little screen time. If they do screen time an hour here and there, that's fine. But generally, you want to keep screen time, social media time, no social media time at all, ideally, and really monitor their screen time and have rules around that, but time outdoors. And here's the other thing to remember. ADHD is not a condition as much as it is a personality for most people. Again, most kids are wired. Most of these kids, they're the boys that are this age, they're wired to learn more kinesthetically, and they're not very good. And they're more dreamers, and they really only learn things they're interested in. Think about it. We say it's a attention deficit. Well, how is their attention when they're playing a video game or watching a show they like or engaging with a best friend? Probably pretty good. So it's more selective attention disorder, right? They only plug into and connect to things that they're really passionate about. And by the way, I'm like this as well. If I'm doing something, I'm completely unaware of what's going on around me. And that's part of my personality, part of the way my brain is wired. And that's also, but it's also a gift. Like I'm able to lock in and hone in on something, and there can be all kinds of things going on around me, and I'm just still locked and zoned in. A lot of athletes are that way. Baseball pitchers, they call it the zone. Like I can get into the zone very easy versus my wife, Chelsea. There's all this chaos going on around her. She's a little bit, maybe thrown off by it a little bit more. And I think that's women more than men sometimes too, because women are more multitaskers. They're doing this and this and this, and some guys are just locked in. All that being said, follow the diet, the supplements, activity, time outdoors, catering a little bit to their unique personality. All of those things will help tremendously, ADD and ADHD. Next question is, what are some healthy habits for people in their 60s? Number one, walking. Walk and walk and walk and walk. Number two, weights. As much weight as you can, but don't overdo it. You don't want to do injury. I'd work with a personal trainer that helps with functional movement to where you're doing the things you still want to be able to do when you're in your 80s and 90s. So think about it. What are the things you still want to be able to do when you're in your 80s? You want to be able to get up and down off a toilet, okay? You want to be able to pick up a grandchild, right? So maybe it's a kettlebell and you do a type of squat or hip hinge where you're doing a kettlebell that's 35 pounds. It's the weight of your 3 or 4 year old in the future, right? When you're taking care of your grandkids. So I would say walking, functional weight training and movement. Next one is community. This is really important is having deep relationships, throughout all of your life, even as you start to get, later and later and later in years. The next thing I would say is doing a little bit of fasting sometimes can help. The next thing I would say is upping your protein intake. Most people are not getting enough protein. So when you're doing the weights, you want to do a lot of protein around it. And so I would be doing both collagen protein, like a bone broth protein, and I would do muscle building proteins every meal. And so you want to make sure you're getting plenty of protein, and then consume more longevity foods. Study and read and educate yourself more on longevity. I'm going to continue to put out a lot more videos and content on how to live longer, healthier, because the reality is almost all disease is caused by organs aging too quickly. An amazing study came out recently that said that certain organs in individuals age faster than others. I'll give you an example of this. So I might have a patient come in and they might have, and let's say they're 40 years old. Well, they may have the skin of a 30-year-old and look really young on their skin, but maybe they have the thyroid of a 60 or 70-year-old. And so that's causing their issues. So what you want to be able to do essentially is turn back the clock and regenerate and heal and make that organ younger. And you can do that. We can make your thyroid younger. You can make your gut younger. You can make your heart younger. And so that's what you want to do. So I would continue to, hey, subscribe if you're not subscribed, because I'm going to be coming out with some amazing information. I've got Gary Brecka coming on the podcast, Gabrielle Lyons, some amazing longevity experts, Dr. Will Cole, that are going to be coming up in the future that we're going to get into all of this information and so much more. But a few of my favorite longevity foods are, very dark colored berries and super fruits. So blueberries, blackberries, raspberries, goji berries, maki berry, and then things like pomegranate and figs. Those are some of the best longevity fruits. Again, lots of vegetables, organs, as I've talked about, collagen and bone broth, an amazing longevity food, wild salmon. And so getting more of those longevity foods are some things I think would also be very good and help you stay younger longer. And those are some of the habits. The last thing I would say, so you asked about healthy habits. Yeah, connecting with community regularly, finding a purpose, especially if you're going to retire, well, you need to have the thing that's next if you end up retiring. What is the thing you're doing next? Because studies show, there's a great study called the Ohio Longevity Study, and they went and they found that when people retire, oftentimes they don't live as long if they don't find something afterwards that's really tied to a mission and purpose, to a way they're really still contributing to society and the world in a major way, contributing to their family and others. So that's really important that you have a mission and purpose. And then continue to grow, have a growth habit. What is something you continue to get better at? Learning and educating yourself and reading is a very important habit to stay younger longer as well. Last question, how do you build wealth? Well, here's a few things I would say. One of my favorites is, this is a biblical principle, the parable of the talents. And you'll hear me tell this a lot because I think it's relevant to so many things in life. But, God gives somebody 1 talent, another 2, another 5. The person with 1 talent buries their talent. The person with 2 and 5 go and double that talent. Well, in that parable, they're talking specifically about money, but it also can be true for your God-given talents and skills, those unique gifts that you have. And so how do you build wealth? Well, number one is, what are your unique gifts? What can you be the best in the world at? Are you a great communicator? Are you great at customer service? Are you great at, what are you great at? What are your strengths? Become aware of your strengths, those gifts that you have that can be turned into skills, and take those and grow in those to the maximum capacity, and then tie that to something financially. That's one thing I would say. The other thing I would say is you should have sort of two ways of making money. One, the way you bring money in terms of your job, whatever your job and career is. But then once you have that money and you save it and you spend less, so let's say you're able to keep, I don't know, $1,000 a month if you got to that point, well, then what do you do with that $1,000 a month that you save? And listen, maybe it's $100 a month, whatever the number is. But then you need to have that next thing to where you're able to make 7-10% plus interest on it. And that might be making wise investments in the stock market, could be flipping houses or investing in real estate. Whatever it is, but I would say that's how you build wealth, is you have a career that brings in a good amount, that where you're growing a skill to where you're able to make more. So that's one. You then are power of compounding interest on the back end, making those good investments. The last thing I'll say is, people that I know that are wealthy, that are truly wealthy with great character, they're also very generous people. So I would say sow into other people. Invest in yourself, in your growth, in your own businesses and career. Invest in others. Give to charities and mission-driven organizations. Be a generous person. This is the principle in the Bible of you reap what you sow. In the Indian religions, it's karma, right? But there is that reality of you will reap what you sow. Are you sowing into yourself and to other people? Because if not, you're not going to reap a harvest. You're not going to build wealth. And so it's really, really important. Think about some of the people you watch on Shark Tank, even like a Mark Cuban. He's constantly investing in other people and companies. The people that are the best in business, they're investing in the best leaders in organizations, are investing in their top team members, which is allowing them to grow and allow the entire organization to flourish. And so the best way to build wealth is to build a leader, be generous, and mentor others will really help you in growing your wealth. And by the way, I did an entire episode on how to build wealth. So if you want to know my entire playbook on how to build wealth in the purpose-driven way, not the take advantage of people way, but the way that's truly virtuous and purpose and mission-driven, then hey, you've got to listen to that episode. I'll put that at the top of the screen right here for you to click on and watch that episode. Also want to say, hey, thanks so much for tuning in here to the Dr. Josh Ack Show, where every week I uncover the truth and the principles of how to live your best life. Also, make sure to subscribe, like, and share this. There are so many people who maybe don't know how to heal naturally or build wealth or live out their purpose. And so thanks everybody for being on mission with me and helping spread the truth that I'm trying to on this podcast and show. So thanks so much. And I can't wait to see you on the next episode. Hey, if you liked this episode, then you're going to love my last Q&A episode where I share my morning routine, keys to longevity, and so much more. Click here to watch it now.